Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating slice of ancient history, non-Roman osseous ateliers in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. Now, if osseous ateliers sounds incredibly academic, don't worry. We're simply talking about ancient bone, antler, and horn workshops. Okay, let's dive right into this. So take just a second and picture a tribal craftsman's workspace from, your favorite historical movie or fantasy show. What comes to mind? It's probably a massive timber-lined hall, right? Maybe there's a burly blacksmith figure crafting hundreds of intricate bows, surrounded by these pristine, glowing finished weapons and cool decorations. Well, we're gonna go ahead and shatter that myth right now. The Hollywood fantasy gives us giant tribal armories, spotless floors, and mystical druidic decor. But the archaeological reality? It's entirely different. We are looking at modest repair zones, plenty of dirt, and most importantly, literal piles of bone and antler waste. It's gritty, it's highly specialized, and it requires some serious forensic archaeology to actually understand. Here's our roadmap for today. We've got 1. The myth of barbarian workshops. 2. Reading the ancient waste. 3. Sarmatians, graves and repair kits. 4. Celts, urban hybrid craft shops. 5. Dacians, from hill forts to forts. And finally, 6. The archaeologist's golden rule. All right, part 1, the myth of barbarian workshops. Ethnographic fantasy versus archaeological reality. First things first, the term barbarian was really just a generic Greco-Roman label for basically anyone who wasn't them. So treating distinct groups as having one single barbarian workspace is a huge mistake. To find a true workshop, we don't look for a pristine, finished object. We look for workshop signatures. This is the crucial archaeological evidence proving on-site production. We're hunting for unfinished objects, offcuts, partially worked antlers, lathe-turned waste, and concentrated debris. Because look, if you found a beautiful finished bone comb in a grave, it just proves someone owned it and was buried with it. To prove it was actually made there, you need the garbage. Moving on to part 2, reading the ancient waste, the forensic science of bone, antler, and horn. Think about the raw materials themselves for a second, because you really see the sheer engineering resourcefulness of these ancient craftsmen. They weren't just grabbing random animal parts. They were highly selective based on material science. Bone, particularly the long bones of cattle and horses, has a dense cortex. This makes it absolutely perfect for rigid, small objects like flat plates, hairpins, and pieces, which are just small containers. Antler, though, specifically from red deer or roe deer, completely different. It is highly shock-resistant and flexible. Because it can absorb sudden shocks without shattering, it was the absolute premium material for military gear, like bow stiffeners. And then you have horn, from cattle or sheep, which is great for vessels and sheets, but it rarely survives in the archaeological record, making it much harder to track. So how do they actually make these items? Archaeologists uncover what's called the chaîne opératoire. That's just a fancy term for the precise production sequence. It's fascinating when you break it down. Step 1 is raw material acquisition, often just taking butchery refuse or collecting shed antlers out in the woods. Step 2 is blank production, literally chopping or sawing the bone into a workable block. Step 3 is rough shaping and fine turning, using carving knives or even lathes. And finally, step 4 is polishing and assembling it with wood, leather, or metal. The beautiful thing here is, when we find pieces discarded halfway through, like at step 2 or 3, we know we've struck gold and found an actual workshop. Section 3, Sarmatians, graves, and repair kits. Basically, the nomadic illusion. Let's apply this to our first case study, the Sarmatians. They were a steppe nomadic people, and our archaeological footprint for their boneworking is, well, it's quite surprising when you actually look at the data. The evidence is heavily weighted toward graves, not workshops. For example, the pierogi catacomb grave from the late 1st century AD features an elite warrior buried with an incredible composite bow reinforced with bone plates. In the Don Prout region, we find female graves filled with bone pixies, those toiletry boxes, but they were mostly imported from the Roman Empire. We also find bone awls for sewing, but here is the catch. There is little to no evidence of fixed, permanent ateliers. Finding an elite bow in a grave proves status and use. It absolutely does not prove that there was a massive local factory on that exact spot. So what is the actual Sarmatian reality? These were likely modest, completely portable repair and production zones. Imagine a highly efficient, small-scale repair kit to maintain horse gear, fix a bow, or just maintain household tools, maybe done right outside a tent. It was a practical, mobile solution, not some giant, permanent tribal armory. All right, part 4, Celts' urban hybrid craft shops, lathes, stockpiles, and Roman contact. Now, as Celtic societies became more urbanized and interacted directly with the expanding Roman Empire, the archaeological footprint gets much larger and a whole lot clearer. Just look at this number, 15. That is the number of partially worked roe and red deer antlers found stockpiled together at the late Latane settlement of Bratislava's Lace Pieski. 15 might not sound like a massive number, but this isn't just a random discarded bone. This hard data proves organized stockpiling, blank preparation, and dedicated storage for later finishing. These Celtic sites reveal incredibly sophisticated hybrid workshops. It's truly amazing to see the crossover here. At Magdalensberg, we find distinct antler and horn waste proving local production, but they were using lathes to churn out overwhelmingly Mediterranean-style writing tools, gaming counters, and pycetes. At Colchester in Britain, archaeologists found unfinished bone furniture appliques. Those are pieces meant to decorate wooden couches or chests. These workshops were integrated right into multi-craft urban neighborhoods, often your butchers for easy access to fresh bone. And, notably, there is zero evidence of fantasy druidic paraphernalia or magical Celtic knotwork in these 1st and 2nd century debris piles. None. It was just a highly practical, Roman-influenced mixed product business. Part 5 now. Dacians from hill forts to forts, elite terraces and militarized frontiers. Living in what is roughly modern-day Romania, the Dacian timeline offers a really fascinating look at how workshops shifted dramatically from elite kingdom control to militarized Roman fort supply after the Roman conquest around 106 AD. Before the conquest, at the Ardeu hill fort, archaeologists found 44 bone and antler objects. But context is literally everything here. This workshop wasn't down in the open village. It was located way up on an artificial terrace, firmly inside the aristocracy's elite space, right next to a blacksmith shop. It even contained a bone gaming die that was likely imported from the Roman world. This shows us that early Dacian workshops were mixed craft spaces controlled by elites, churning out leisure and domestic goods, and they were already integrating Roman imports before the empire officially arrived. Now here is where it gets really fascinating. What happens after the Roman conquest, specifically at the auxiliary fort of Porolissum? Well, if you just looked at the finished objects found around the site, you'd see they were mostly made from cattle and horse long bones, everyday items for civilian and fort use. But if you investigate the half-finished debris inside the actual workshop zone, it is concentrated almost exclusively on red deer antler crowns. Why? Because this specific military workshop was heavily specialized. They needed those shock-resistant antler crowns to mass-produce stiffeners for military bows and arrows for the frontier soldiers. The waste tells the true, hyper-focused story of the workshop's purpose. Which brings us to part 6, the archaeologist's golden rule, reconstructing reality from the refuse. So, after traveling across the Sarmatian steppes, the Celtic urban centers, and the Dacian frontier, how should we actually reconstruct reality? First off, we have to avoid some super common modern mistakes. We cannot collapse distinct cultures into one generic barbarian trope. We absolutely cannot treat a finished, polished good in a burial as proof that a workshop sat on that exact spot. We must avoid the temptation to over-militarize everything, ignoring the massive output of hairpins, sewing awls, and furniture decorations. We can't imagine pristine, spotless workspaces because real crafting is dirty. It leaves debris. And finally, we have got to stop projecting fantasy decors onto functional, everyday ancient items. The source material gives us this climactic takeaway, which really serves as a guiding light for understanding history. Reconstruct the waste first, the product second, and the identity claims last. It's brilliant. True history isn't found in the gleaming, perfect artifacts sitting on a pedestal in a museum. The truth of how people actually lived, worked, and survived is found in their offcuts, their failures, their trash, and their half-finished projects. Which leaves us with a rather provocative thought to end on. We've just spent this whole explainer reading the garbage of the Sarmatians, the Celts, and the Dacians to uncover their daily realities. So look around your own workspace right now. When future archaeologists dig up our spaces thousands of years from today, what story is our own waste going to tell about us? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.